Once, as they drifted silently past a massive white cloud, they saw on the top of it a group of strange, tall, wispy-looking things that were about twice the height of ordinary men. They were not easy to see at first because they were almost as white as the cloud itself, but as the Peach sailed closer, it became obvious that these things were actually living creatures. Tall, wispy, wraith-like, shadowy, white creatures who looked as though they were made out of a mixture of cotton wool and candy floss and thin white hairs. "Oh," the ladybird said, "I don't like this at all." "Shh," James whispered back. "Don't let them hear you. They must be cloud men." "Cloud men?" they murmured, huddling closer together for comfort. "Oh dear, oh dear."
"Oh, I'm glad I'm blind and can't see 'em," the earthworm said, "or I'd probably scream."
"I hope they don't turn round and see us," Miss Spider stammered.
"Do you think they'd eat us?"
the earthworm asked.
"They'd eat you," the centipede answered, grinning. "They'd cut you up like a salami and eat you in thin slices."
The poor earthworm began to quiver all over with fright.
"But what are they doing?"
the old green grasshopper whispered. "I don't know," James answered softly. "Let's watch and see." The cloud men were all standing in a group, and they were doing something peculiar with their hands. First they would reach out, all of them at once, and grab handfuls of cloud. Then they would roll these handfuls of cloud in their fingers until they turned into what looked like large white marbles. Then they would toss the marbles to one side and quickly grab more bits of cloud and start over again. It was all very silent and mysterious. The pile of marbles beside them kept growing larger and larger. Soon there was a truckload of them there at least. "They must be absolutely mad," the centipede said. "There's nothing to be afraid of here."
"Be quiet, you pest," the earthworm whispered. "We shall all be eaten if they see us."
But the cloud men were much too busy with what they were doing to have noticed the great Peach floating silently up behind them. Then the watchers on the Peach saw one of the cloud men raising his long wispy arms above his head, and they heard him shouting, "All right, boys, that's enough. Get the shovels." And all the other cloud men immediately let out a strange high-pitched whoop of joy and started jumping up and down and waving their arms in the air. Then they picked up enormous shovels and rushed over to the pile of marbles and began shoveling them as fast as they could over the side of the cloud into space. "Down they go," they chanted as they worked. "Down they go! Hail and snow, freezes and sneezes and noses will blow." "It's hailstones," whispered James excitedly. "They've been making hailstones, and now they're showering them down onto the people in the world below." "Hailstones?" the centipede said. "That's ridiculous. This is summertime. You don't have hailstones in summertime." "Well, they're practicing for the winter," James told him. "I don't believe it," shouted the centipede, raising his voice. "Shh!" the others whispered. And James said softly, "For heaven's sake, centipede, don't make so much noise." The centipede roared with laughter. "Those imbeciles couldn't hear anything," he cried. "They're deaf as doorknobs. You watch." And before anyone could stop him, he'd cupped his front feet to his mouth and was yelling at the cloud men as loud as he could. "Idiots!" he yelled. "Nincompoops! Half-wits! Blunderheads! Asses! What on earth do you think you're doing over there?" The effect was immediate. The cloud men jumped round as if they'd been stung by wasps, and when they saw the great golden Peach floating past them not 50 yards away in the sky, they gave a yelp of surprise and dropped their shovels to the ground. And there they stood, with the moonlight streaming down all over them, absolutely motionless, like a group of tall, white, hairy statues, staring and staring at the gigantic fruit as it went sailing by. The passengers on the Peach, all except the centipede, sat frozen with terror, looking back at the cloud men and wondering what was going to happen next. "Now you've done it, you loathsome pest," whispered the earthworm to the centipede. "I'm not frightened of them," shouted the centipede. And to show everybody once again that he wasn't, he stood up to his full height and started dancing about and making insulting signs at the cloud men with all 42 of his legs. This evidently infuriated the cloud men beyond belief. All at once they spun round and grabbed great handfuls of hailstones and rushed to the edge of the cloud and started throwing them at the Peach, shrieking with fury all the time. "Look out!" cried James. "Quick, lie down! Lie flat on the deck!" It was lucky they did. A large hailstone can hurt you as much as a rock or a lump of lead if it's thrown hard enough, And my goodness, how those cloud men could throw! The hailstones came whizzing through the air like bullets from a machine gun, and James could hear them smashing against the sides of the peach and burying themselves in the peach flesh with horrible squelching noises. And then ping, 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 as they bounced off the poor ladybird's shell because she couldn't lie as flat as the others. And then as one of them hit the centipede right on the nose, and again as another one hit him somewhere else. "Ow!" he cried. "Ow, stop, stop, stop!" But the cloud men had no intention of stopping. James could see them rushing about on the cloud like a lot of huge hairy ghosts, picking up hailstones from the pile, dashing to the edge of the cloud, hurling the hailstones at the peach, dashing back again to get more, and then when the pile of stones was all gone, they simply grabbed handfuls of cloud and made as many more as they wanted, and much bigger ones now, some of them as large as cannonballs. "Quickly!" cried James. "Down the tunnel or we'll all be wiped out!" There was a rush for the tunnel entrance, and half a minute later everybody was safely downstairs inside the stone of the peach, trembling with fright, and listening to the noise of the hailstones as they came crashing against the side of the peach. I'm a wreck," groaned the centipede. "I am wounded all over." "Why, serve you right," said the earthworm. Would somebody kindly look and see if my shell is cracked?" the ladybird said. "Give us some light," shouted the old green grasshopper. "I can't," wailed the glowworm. "They've broken my bulb." "Oh, then put in another one," the centipede said. "Be quiet a moment," said James. "Listen, I do believe they're not hitting us any more." They all stopped talking and listened. Yes, the noise had ceased. The hailstones were no longer smashing against the peach. "We've left them behind." "Oh, the seagulls must have pulled us away out of danger." "Hooray! Let's go up and see." Cautiously, with James going first, they all climbed back up the tunnel. James poked his head out and looked around. "It's all clear," he called. "I can't see them anywhere." One by one, the travellers came out again onto the top of the peach and gazed carefully around. The moon was still shining as brightly as ever, and there were still plenty of huge, shimmering cloud mountains on all sides. But there were no cloud men in sight now. "The peach is leaking!" shouted the old green grasshopper, peering over the side. "It's full of holes, and the juice is dripping out everywhere." "That does it!" cried the earthworm. "If the peach is leaking, then we shall surely sink." "Oh, don't be an ass," the centipede told him. "We're not in the water now." "Oh, look!" shouted the ladybird. "Look, look, look over there!" Everybody swung round to look. In the distance and directly ahead of them, they now saw a most extraordinary sight. It was a kind of arch, a colossal, curvy-shaped thing that reached high up into the sky and came down again at both ends. The ends were resting upon a huge, flat cloud that was as big as a desert. "Now, what in the world is that?" asked James. "It's a bridge. It's an enormous hoop cut in half." "It's a giant horseshoe standing upside down." "Stop me if I'm wrong," murmured the centipede, going white in the face. "But might those not be cloud men climbing all over it?" There was a dreadful silence. The peach floated closer and closer. "They are cloud men. There are hundreds of them. Thousands. Millions." "I don't want to hear about it," shrieked the poor blind earthworm. "I'd rather be on the end of a fishhook and used as bait than come up against those terrible creatures again." "I'd rather be fried alive and eaten by a Mexican," wailed the old green grasshopper. "Please keep quiet," whispered James. "It's our only hope." They crouched very still on top of the peach, staring at the cloudmen. The whole surface of the cloud was literally swarming with them, and there were hundreds more up above climbing about on that monstrous, crazy arch. "But what is that thing?" whispered the ladybird. "What are they doing to it?" "I don't care what they're doing to it," the centipede said, scuttling over to the tunnel entrance. "I'm not staying up here. Goodbye." But the rest of them were too frightened or too hypnotized by the whole affair to make a move. "Do you know what?" James whispered. "What?" they said. "What?" "That enormous arch. They seem to be painting it. They've got pots of paint and big brushes. You look." And he was quite right. The travellers were close enough now to see that this was exactly what the Cloudmen were doing. They all had huge brushes in their hands, and they were splashing the paint onto the great curvy arch in a frenzy of speed, so fast, in fact, that in a few minutes the whole of the arch became covered with the most glorious colours: reds, blues, greens, yellows, and purples. "It's a rainbow!" everyone said at once. "They're making a rainbow! Oh, isn't it beautiful? Just look at those colours. Centipede!" they shouted. "You must come up and see this!" They were so enthralled by the beauty and brilliance of the rainbow that they forgot to keep their voices low any longer. The centipede poked his head cautiously out of the tunnel entrance. "Well, well, well," he said. "I've always wondered how those things were made. But why all the ropes? What are they doing with those ropes?" "Good heavens, they're pushing it off the cloud!" cried James. "There it goes! They're lowering it down to the earth with ropes." "And I'll tell you something else," the centipede said sharply. "If I'm not greatly mistaken, we ourselves are going to bump right into it." "Bless my soul, he's right!" the old green grasshopper exclaimed.